One. Yeah, here we go. Hey, everyone. So I'm live today with Gene Balfour, a new candidate, a recent candidate for the PPC for the riding of Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, Ontario. Let me just pause this here. And so today we're going to be, like I said, I'm going to be having a conversation with this gentleman, and I've known him for quite a long time, and he is a libertarian at heart, like myself. And well, not just heart, but from mind as well, because that's the other thing. Is that's the beautiful thing about being a libertarian is not just about your heart; it's about the mind. It's about a balancing of those two aspects of what it is to be a human being. But it's nice to see that we have someone that actually does have a foundational base of libertarian thought and libertarian philosophy that's now entered into the PPC race. Because that's the thing that I found was a little bit disconcerting and concerning to me. Is the PPC going to bring just a bunch of conservatives to the base, or disgruntled conservatives because they're not happy with the position or the stances that the current Conservative Party of Canada stance they take on a lot of the social and economic issues. So to me, I don't want to just align myself with people that would predominantly be considered conservatives. I want to align with people that care about the things that Maxime suggests that's most important, which is individual freedom, personal responsibility, respect, and fairness. And those things, just those four aspects alone, are completely conducive with libertarian thought and libertarian philosophy. Absolutely. So it's nice to have someone like Gene jump into the fray and offer that kind of perspective without coming from it with a left or a right political perspective. Because that's the thing about a libertarian. We want to expand liberties in both the social and economic realm, whereas conservatives might be predominantly want to worry about giving you more economic freedom, and historically the liberals would want to give you your social freedoms. Libertarians say, oh, I'm not going to pick one or the other. We want to expand freedoms for both areas and aspects of your life. So like I say, I'm very appreciative to have Jane here today, and I'm just going to be asking a few questions in regards to his new position as candidate for the PPC. So if you just want to take a few minutes or a second or whatever, however much time you want to take, Gene, just to give yourself a little introduction to the people today.
All right. Thanks very much, Bennett.
No problem.
I wanted to respond to one of the things you just said a minute ago about the PPC attracting primarily conservatives, disgruntled conservatives. After becoming nominated or acclaimed as a candidate for this riding, we had a meeting last Sunday. It was down in Whitby. And that was a regional meeting with all the acclaimed candidates and their executive team. And in that meeting, everyone was asked to stand up and introduce themselves and give a little blurb as to what they'd done in their background. And I found there were a lot of people in that room that were associated now with the PPC that had come from every one of the other political parties. There were conservatives, there were liberals, there were NDP, there was, of course, me as a libertarian. And so what's really quite interesting to see that Max and his message is actually reverberating with a lot of people who historically were tied to other platforms for whatever reason, And that's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of what Max is doing. So my background in a nutshell, I've been involved in politics, and I'll talk first about the political part because that's more or less what you were asking about. I've been involved with the Libertarian Party of Ontario since 2007. It's a funny story because I was out cutting my grass one day, and as I'm cutting my grass, I'm listening to the radio, of course. You got to keep busy, right? And so I'm hearing about this meeting in downtown Toronto, and it was a libertarian meeting, and I didn't know what a libertarian was, like a lot of people. And I kind of thought maybe it was a religious group or something. So I finished cutting the grass. I went downstairs. I checked out the internet to find out what this was, and I discovered there was this political party that had all the values and all the things that I've been looking for years and just didn't know where it was. And here it was. So I got dressed. I went downtown. I knocked on the door of their annual general meeting. I said, can I come on in? And they let me in for the next 3 hours. I hung out with the then executive of the Ontario Libertarian Party, and I heard names like Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises and Hans Hermann Hoppe and all these other names that are now so familiar to me, and they're my heroes from an intellectual point of view. So that's how I got started. And, about a year and a half later, I found myself nominated and accepted a role on the executive as one of the members at large. You dip your toe in the water with one of those. And then a few years later, of course, I much later, as I was getting closer to retirement, Alan Small, you may know Alan, was the leader of the Ontario Libertarian Party. And Alan was looking to finish his career as the leader. So we decided we were going to try to get a full slate of candidates. Something had never happened in Canada before. And so because I'm a former recruiter, a headhunter, I knew that I was the guy in the party that had the ability to be able to draw people in and get them registered and run it. So we were quite successful. Didn't quite get the full slate, but we put in 116 candidates out of 124 ridings, and we had a blast doing it. A lot of fun. Just a quick story. We were up north, Scott Marshall and myself, and we were knocking on doors way up north, way above Sudbury and North Bay, and we're going around knocking on doors to collect nomination signatures, because you had to get a bunch of signatures from people in each riding where we were running a candidate. So when we were finished with that, I'd pull out my harmonica and start blowing my harmonica down the road as he's driving away, and we were just laughing our heads off, you know. So yeah, we had a great time. We love being libertarians because it's a very free thinking, you know, very accepting environment for us.
Yeah, well, what I've always loved about people that come about things from the libertarian perspective, or even people that don't understand that they're libertarians, you know, at their core, philosophically, are people that just have that live, let live mentality, right? They don't come at things in regards to situations with immediate need or necessity to be confrontational. They just want to delve down into the topics and subjects that matters most to us, like I say, whether they're social or economically. So what I've always loved about libertarians is, like you say, they could be coming from the left or the right side of the political spectrum, or apolitical in nature entirely, and maybe never delved into politics in their entire life. And all they really want to be, to me, they seem to be predominantly people that are concerned about expanding personal freedoms and being inquisitive as to how, not just to complain about the current issues and problems, but what's the best way forward to get out from underneath these forms of collectivism that now currently take center stage and dominate every area or aspect of our life. And at the end of the day, it always comes down to freedom, having a finite set of rules and principles, and then allowing freedom to fill that void, and not trying to be dictatorial in nature. And I think most people flourish, like I say, whether it's in their family life or their social life, or as a community or extended community in a state or a nation, is I think most people are more conducive to the libertarian thought and libertarian philosophy. It's just that, like you understand, in Canada, we haven't been taught these kind of things well enough. Now, America, the people to our south, they've understood this stuff intrinsically, philosophically, even for hundreds of years. But because in Canada, we, kind of like quasi-monarchs, so we weren't quite ready to go fully independent, So we have a different psychology and a philosophy in Canada that's a little bit more middle of the line. But because of the fact that we live in a northern climate, we also have the resiliency. And I think actually we're perfectly placed as people of Canada, not just based on our historical culture, but because, like I see, our geographical landmass, that actually libertarian values and principles are very much conducive, which would continue to not just keep Canada the strong and free, but actually would even progress us even further as far as understand what that even means, what that represents. And people like you stepping up to the plate and joining the PPC is going to help expand upon that. Maxime is a great guy, and he has some good understanding and grasp. But like I say, just being a political leader isn't enough. You need a ground base of supporters such as yourself, with the intellectual knowledge and the philosophical understandings to help steer and guide even someone like Maxime down that proper path. And I, for one, am like I said, I'm very appreciative to know that you are part of the PPC now. So at least I know that there is a definite libertarian voice that's going to be representative. And I think most people, and you've probably understood this yourself, any conversation you've probably had, is you've probably realized that most people, once you say what you have to say regarding the libertarian philosophy, is most people are completely conducive and accepting of that philosophy.
Well, you're right. I may have mentioned it yet, but I've run 6 times as a libertarian candidate. 1 time federally 4 years ago, 5 times provincially. And my experience in doing that, being a small party, what they considered us as a fringe party is what they consider us politically amongst the media. But, we don't have the budgets. We don't have the organizations. And so for that reason, we don't have the clout in the marketplace to get out there and explain to people what libertarianism is, what we really stand for. And so I would say, if I was going to stop and think about the people I've talked to over the years in my campaign efforts and otherwise, that, in the beginning, 10 years ago when I was first running, maybe 1% of the population, of the people I spoke to, at least anyhow, even had heard the term libertarian, let alone understood what it was. over the years, of course, libertarianism is becoming cool. So there's more people who are hearing about it. And there's a lot of people who are jumping on the bandwagon because it's kind of the new kid on the block. And so now there's at least people who know a little bit about it. They know the name and they know, that some catchwords like freedom and liberty and a few other things. But like you said, I'm very much a philosophically oriented guy. The kind of reading that I do, the kind of thinking that I do, I really, before I jump into anything, I really need to understand it. And just so full disclosure, I had fully intended to run for the Libertarian Party of Canada up until about December. And at that point, a few things happened because I'd been following Maxime Bernier for a number of years out of interest in the man himself. I wasn't necessarily interested in the Conservative Party, but I followed his leadership. And I actually joined the CPC just so I could support his campaign to become the leader of the party. I was also in Ottawa last year when the Libertarian Party of Canada convention took place, annual general meeting took place. And in that meeting, outside of that meeting, Maxime Bernier was there. I met him for the first time there. And he was there because he was talking to Tim Owen, who's the leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada, about the possibility of Maxime becoming the leader of that party and asking Tim to step aside. And there was a lot of buzz going on within the Libertarian Party's Facebook community and other things. And there was a lot of, some people were in favor of it and other people weren't. And the ones that were not were the people who would be what I consider what they call the anarcho-capitalists, which are the more extreme version of libertarianism, where they would like to, in a perfect world for them, they would like to have no government whatsoever. So, and that's pretty unlikely to ever happen, as much as some people might find that attractive. But then there's this other version of libertarianism, which is what I am, and that's a less government libertarian. In other words, the government has extended itself far too far into the lives of everyday Canadians. And because of that, they are interfering with our abilities to be successful, to interact with each other in respectful ways. We have identity politics all over the place, largely put on by political parties as much as anything else. And so, that's not the kind of world I want to be in. I want to be in a world where people respect each other, where we don't have to do finger pointing, name calling. We're in this country together, all of us. And that's the thing I want people to understand, is that we are in this country together. We are neighbors, we are friends, we are co-workers. What's the point of, throwing garbage at each other? There's no point to that whatsoever. So you're going to find that Maxime Bernier's campaign he won't be a name caller. He won't be, throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks. He won't be doing that at all. The second time I met him was back in March, when he was running a rally for Robert Gertz, who is the candidate in the by-election down there. And so I went up to Max and I told him I was considering running for the party, but I had a lot of questions and I was still doing my homework. And one night, my wife, Cynthia, she comes into the room and she's got an iPad in her hand and says, "Gene, you got to see this." And what it was Dave Rubin. You know who Dave Rubin is on the internet? Yeah?
For sure, yeah.
So Dave Rubin was interviewing Maxime Bernier. It was a full-hour interview. So I watched that whole hour interview with a great deal of interest, and a couple of things jumped out at me. One was that Maxime Bernier, very early in that interview, said, "I am a libertarian." And I kind of was shocked. Here's a guy that's, setting up a national party, and he's publicly declaring himself as a libertarian. That was surprising to me. The second thing he says is, he's a big fan of the Mises Institute. And if you know the Mises Institute, it's the number one, think tank of libertarian thought and Austrian economics thought in the world. There's nothing even close to it. And if Max is watching that kind of stuff and touting it, he's much more like me than I ever realized. Because I'm a big fan of Mises Institute and all those things, and I have been for years, So suddenly I realized there was a leader out there that thought like me. I thought like him. We had a lot in common. He stands by principle. And the reason why I've been a libertarian, number one reason, is because I really believe in its principles. Other than that, everything else is just people. But the principles are the thing that stand the test of time. And as long as they're consistent, and as long as people support them, we'll always have a force in Canada to try to get this nation a more cohesive nation where people will work together and play together and pray together and whatever else we do together, That's sort of my 10 cents worth.
Yeah, no, that's actually perfect. And because I've been friends with people such as yourself and Tim Owen for years now, actually, I'm just going to point this out, and I'm going to get back to the question of
Sure.
hand. But I just want to point out, for me, from my own perspective, is I would love, just like you, I would love to align with supporting Tim Owen. I a tremendous amount of respect for the man and the Libertarian Party of Canada. But what I have come to learn, because I've been very much entrenched into learning about the philosophy of libertarian, is it's really hard to be a staunch libertarian and even have take a political position, because it kind of sends you off into that realm. If you're going to be universally consistent and honest about your principles, you have to say some really disturbing things that in the political realm is not quite conducive, right? It's like being a Catholic priest standing on the pulpit saying you don't believe in God. It's really weird, right? Which is why and Tim knows this, and I'm sure you know this as well.
Yeah.
Which is why, to me, it's even weird to have a libertarian party. As much as, of course, philosophically, I'm 100% on board with libertarians. I love everyone that calls himself, and even ones in the political sense, like even yourself, that's delving into the political fray. Once I know you as a person, and I know who you are and what you stand for, then I'm like, okay, I get it. You're just willing to put aside your ideals and for the sake of pragmatism. And I'm completely on board with that, because, like, as far as I'm concerned, I just want us all to be traveling in the same direction. Whereas a political libertarian might want to get off at stop 5. Well, I want to go all the way to the end. Well, as far as my mind, I want to educate people so that they're thinking about that long-term goal of true individual freedom, being free from forced subjugation and slavery and coercion. But in the political realm, I get how difficult that is. That's not a kind of message that's conducive with function in the political realm. So that's why I'm very appreciative that people that are minarchists such as yourself, although I'm sure philosophically you're not necessarily minarchist. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but at least in the political realm, you have that ability to use your verbal skills and make that minarchist argument, which, like I say, to me, I used to be very much purist, like one of those people that, you went from a minarchist to anarcho-capitalist in 6 months kind of thing. That's just the thought. That's just what rolls in my head. But I don't think that Canada or the US is going to pivot and change to where we no longer have a state, right? So that's going to be a reality going forward. So yes, I'm very appreciative of the fact that people like yourself that have that libertarian mindset and that philosophical understanding and those principles are delving into the fray. But that's where I think PPC is actually the best place to do so, because you don't have to soil the libertarian name or that philosophy, and you can still have those libertarian values and principles, because if you're a representation of those things that matter most, like personal responsibility, individual liberty, respect, and fairness, that's completely conducive with most people, whether they want to identify as a libertarian or, like an old school conservative or even a classical liberal or even an independent. That, to me, so the People's Party of Canada seemed to be, which is why I jumped on board and adopted that their platform very early, is not because I think they're the end all be all, but I think that is the next step, the next evolutionary phase for us in Canada to use as a precipice to take it towards our ultimate goal, where we have a genuine understanding of what individual rights and freedom actually entail. So I'm very, like I say, I'm very pleased to see that, even Tim, like you said, he wanted to bring and show support and join and combine forces. And even though that didn't actually happen technically, you can rest assured that most people that would have been supporters of Tim Owen or the Libertarian Party, or supporters of yourself when you were in the Libertarian Party, you guaranteed they're moved over and now have shifted to support you, even though you're flying under a different party banner. But like I say, to me, I don't care what the political banner is at the time, to me, as long as we want to travel down that road, because right now all the other parties are predominantly proponents of collectivism, right? Of top-down authoritarianism. And as long as we're going to get to the stage, even if we got to do it politically, as our first step to getting us back to understand, respect, and individual rights, freedoms, and liberties, I'm totally on board supporting you, Maxime Bernier, or anyone else that's willing to step into the fray and challenge the political orthodoxy that now is dominating us and actually creating a more divisive society, rather than, libertarian philosophy and politics would actually bring more of us together, because now we're actually not fighting each other. We're actually going down the same road because we all have the same goals, which is to respect each other as individuals and treat each other fairly, whether it's social or economically. But anyways, I'm sorry. I have a tendency to, sorry there. I know I tend to go on a little bit of a rant myself. But anyways, I just want to start getting into these questions here, because I did want to make sure to cover, well, first, you did. Go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to say that I have a lot of respect for Tim Owen as well, and I like the man quite a bit. And And he's declared himself as an ANCAP. And because he did that, that's why I couldn't support him, and I had to go toward the minarchist direction. And it was the right direction because, like I say, I also really, really like Maxime Bernier a lot. As a man, the 2 times I've met you, I've recruited, interviewed people, over 10,000 people. I think I've got pretty good instincts in terms of evaluating people, and determining what kind of character they have. And for my money, both of those men have character out of the gazoo. They're great guys, and they're really principled people, and they really care about what they're doing. No flies on either one of them.
Right on, Gene. No, like I say, and I definitely respect your opinion because, like I said, even before we went live, I've been following you and the kind of things that you put out and present. And like I say, I know you definitely have not just a good philosophical grasp, but you're also pragmatic enough that you'll take a principled approach even when you're talking about politics. And like I say, to me, that's conducive with getting at least a larger subset of the population that's going to want to enter into the political fray. And not even like myself, not like I'm suggesting that that's necessarily a good thing, but just like people have had to help adapt my thinking in the past is politics, even though you might want to ignore politics or pretend it doesn't exist, well, politics is going to actually take center stage and have a profound effect on your social and economic life. So we have to be pragmatic in our approach and deal with the current paradigm that we exist. And like I say, I'm very appreciative to know there are people like yourself that are bringing your philosophical thoughts and your principled understanding in regards to the social economic problems or issues that we face, but doing it in a pragmatic manner, while also helping to educate and inform the people, which is profoundly important. So I guess the next question, so you kind of did touch down a little bit, was your personal background. So where you grew up, the schools, and your general interest and hobbies that kind of led you to, if you want to expand on that actually before I move on. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was born and raised in Toronto. My first 10 years of my life, I was living in Oshawa, which was a great place to live, to be. I was a young athlete, so that was a great place to live. Spent a lot of time in Toronto after that. But during that time, the time I was at University of Waterloo for 5 years. I was in Europe for 1 year traveling when I was 18. So I saw a bit of the world when I was a young man and got a chance to become independent in the way I look at things. But, over the years, I got married like everybody else did. I have 2 wonderful daughters. They're both in the medical industry today. So they're doing very, very well. Cynthia, my wife, and we've been together for a long time, and we have a wonderful life together. I'm now a retired man living in Fenelon Falls. So I've now got the time to devote more to this kinds of stuff than I had previously. And it is a passion for me. So that's really, in a nutshell, what I'm doing these days, spending a lot of time doing that. I'm also an athlete, by the way. I don't know if you know that, but I'm a guy that's really believed in fitness and health and practiced it all of my life. And I still play hockey, and I'm a Nordic cross skater, which is a big thing for me. I do a lot of that. So there's a lot of things about my actual lifestyle that reinforces the philosophy of libertarianism, and the philosophy of libertarianism is deeply ingrained in my views in the People's Party of Canada. So when I look at the PPC, I kind of consider that the PPC is a party based on libertarian principles, and that's why I'm there. And it's not that I've kind of picked one side or the other side. It's more that the PPC and Maxime Bernier will enable me and will get our message out to more Canadians in a more credible way. And that's really my goal. It's I'd love to get elected and go to Ottawa and work with Maxime Bernier to try to bring in more of the kinds of regulations, the kinds of acts that will make this country more cohesive and work better and more productive. Love to be able to do that, but I also know it's a big challenge, and so the first step for all of us is to get out there and tell people what we're about, help them understand us, engage in a discussion if they're willing to do that. But more, I had a philosophy as a father, raising 2 daughters, and I used to call myself the Johnny Appleseed of fathers, and the idea was that I didn't want to tell my kids anything. What I wanted to do is ask them questions and plant seeds, so that if I planted a seed that had some wisdom in it or some message that was going to be useful for them at some point, I was hoping that seed would germinate and grow at some point when they needed it. And of course, I would always be there to help them. Well, I'm kind of the Johnny Appleseed of politics too, because I don't go up to people and say, I want you to vote for me and hand out without them knowing anything about me or knowing anything about what I believe in. So just to ask for a vote without backing it up with some real substance is really me showing, it would be me showing disrespect to the person, because the reality is all of us vote based on what it is that's important to us. And for me to tell you or anybody else what's important to you when I don't know you is really presumptuous. So what I'd rather do is plant the seed and help them understand what we are all about. And then at some point they were going to say, wait a minute, these guys have a message here that does make sense to me. I want to look further into it. And then the initiative falls on them, not so much on me. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. Well, that's perfectly conducive with the personal responsibility aspect of the PPC party, right? Is you took it upon yourself to lead by example. And to me, like I say, whether you want to be a social leader, well, in your own family or in your community, or like I say, as a representation in the political realm, yes, you have to lead by example. And actually, those are the only people that I would actually take seriously. That's the problem why a lot of people are disenfranchised with the political process today. Is why would they trust or listen to or respect people that basically talk out one side of their mouth and then perform actions that are completely opposing or contrary to the things that they espouse out that one side of their mouth? So what people need are people that are actually principled in their position and not just spewing rhetoric, but actually walking the walk. So what you're saying is that's completely conducive, because you take care of yourself physically, economically. Right. You're the one that's stepping up, say that I'm not just telling that you should do that. I'm saying the reason why I think you should do that is because I've done that and it's worked out beneficial, not just to me, but for my family and all those people that know me. I've seen how that has been conducive to not just my own personal happiness and well-being and meaningful life, but I've seen how that's actually benefited a lot of people through no means of force or coercion, just by leading by example. And that's something I think is very important that libertarians in particularly bring to the table, that have this ability to, like I say, lead by example, because of that philosophical understanding of how important it is to respect the individual and the sovereignty of the individual and what it is. And like I say, people can choose to do things however they want, as you would know, like your daughters. You're not going to tell them how they want to live life, but you just want to, like you say, plant those seeds of foundational principles, and what they use with them they can do it however they want to do it. But I think it'll be expansionary or in a manner that will be conducive to not just flourishing for them personally, but it'll actually be good to adopt that for people that are part of their lives. So I'm glad to have people like you that are stepping up the plate and that have the ability to say that I'm not just talking the talk, I've also walked the walk.
The other person I like a lot out there in the public sphere is Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Yes, he's a
book,
Yeah, go ahead. No, if you want to reference his 12 rules for life, yeah, for sure, because that's definitely another recipe for a generation of people that have come up today thinking everything is about figuring out ways where they can offload responsibility. That 12 rule for life is a perfect recipe to counteract that narrative and suggest, no, actually your best path forward for freedom is to adopt personal responsibility.
Exactly. There's been a large trend over the years towards victimization, that people see themselves as victims in various kinds of social or economic contexts, and in some cases, they have legitimately difficult challenges to face in life. But Dr. Jordan Peterson, encourages people to look at their own resources and try to find a way to resolve their own issues and try to move forward and learn in the process. And we all learn and get wiser as we get older, because we do overcome adversity and we put the effort out. But if we stop doing that, if we give the government the power to try to solve every problem in our lives, and so where are we going to get the resilience and the knowledge and the wisdom to be able to lead our own lives effectively? And that's one of the reasons why Max's message is so important to me. It's because I do want to see a nation of very strong, resilient, self-sufficient Canadians. Yes, I'd like them when we need each other. We should be there for each other, but we should be trying to do it on our own first, so that we can build that strength and we can be more resilient and be more productive. That's what's going to benefit everybody. And it matters a lot to me.
Yeah. So now that we've heard that you definitely have some good goals and foundation as far as your personal life and history, what do you have that you're bringing to the table as far as like your employment or your past professional life that's conducive to bringing the philosophy or the ideas of libertarianism? What about your professional life is conducive with bringing that to the forefront?
I think that's really where one of my greatest strengths is. Maybe it is my greatest strength, because I worked in the IT sector, the computer industry, since 1977, so I guess over 40 years. The first 4 years were with IBM Canada, where I was a systems engineer, and then I was a marketing representative. And I've just lost your picture, so I don't know whether you're still there or not.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm still here. No, go ahead, Gene.
Okay. All right. And so that gave me a very good grounding in computer systems. But after that, I became an IT recruiter. And so between 1981 and 2009, which is 28 years, I worked on 100% commission, no salary whatsoever, helping companies to find qualified IT professionals in a very specialized world. And at the same time, helping these qualified computer professionals find better career moves, better circumstances for them when they needed it. So I played that role of broker, and I did it very well. I had a really strong reputation for being very effective. And I did well professionally as well, financially from it, because I did, work hard to develop a strong reputation. But what it did is that job, to me, it was like getting a PhD in economics. And the reason why is because I dealt with every business sector you can think of, whether it was an insurance company, whether it was a manufacturing firm, whether it was a government organization looking for contract staff. So I dealt with them all. And that was important to get an understanding of how they all operated differently. They had different pressures, different priorities. Retail organizations operate very differently than oil companies do, that operate very differently than software companies do. They're all very different. Every business model is different. So I got this appreciation for enormous range of business models and the kinds of organizations, people organizations that support those business models, and also the technology itself and how it supported the gradual change to business models, because technology does that. It changes processes, it changes information flow. And all of these things were every bit a part of my life every single day for 28 years. And I really, really learned a ton from that. And so when I look at the public policy and when I look at economics, and by the way, I did study economics at university. I started an MBA at University of Toronto in the late 70s, and I did study economics and statistics before I dropped out to get married and do a few other things. But I had a fairly good grounding in economics even before I got into this and before I get into the recruiting business. But it's what it does is it helps me to see these some of the pressures that are occurring in our society that are a direct byproduct of the changes that technology is bringing to our world, and understanding a lot of the things that are going on behind the scenes because of my understanding of those processes.
Actually, I'm curious to ask you, now that you brought up the fact that you did have some economic education, and actually it was at the time that was in the 70s. Now, I don't have any formal education as far as the economics, and I've never been a big fan of school.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, actually, when you did go there, this is just my own personal question, is because you understand this, so that, whether it's the classical economist, the classical liberal economist, such as Adam Smith and such, which I think is very much conducive with even the Austrian economists, because to me, the fundamental understanding, I think, of the classical economists or the Austrians is they understand that human psychology is there's not a one size fits all. So there is no way that you can create a universalized, centralized economic system that's going to be conducive for everyone. So they allowed for the ability. That's the beautiful thing about the free market is, and Adam Smith guy alluded to that with the benevolence of the butcher, the baker. No, it's just he's just going to do what's in his best interest, and you can't know what's in everyone's best interest, but you can allow for, like I say, a finite amount of rules or principles that will allow their independence to flourish economically. And if they prosper, good. That means, because if it was done voluntarily, that means both people on either side of the equation walked away feeling beneficially, and they weren't looking at it as a zero-sum game, whereas like how government and politics plays out. So when you were going to school, though, would it have been, did you still get a foundation of the classical, or probably not so much Austrian in Canada, but classical liberal economists, or was it more along the lines of Keynesianisms with interventionist kind of policies as far as government in regards to the economy? That's just my own personal question, because like I say, I don't have any actual genuine personal knowledge as regards to the education system, even if you go back to the 70s or 80s. But at the time when you were going to school, what was it more conducive? What were they trying to teach predominantly?
Well, the best way to answer that is to kind of give you a very high-level thumbnail sketch of economics and its evolution over the last 150 years. Okay, so prior to 1900, the government was fairly small and played a fairly small role, and there was no central bank to manage the economies back then. So the economy managed itself in a sense that there were really two main actors in the economy. One was the provider of goods and services, so they were the business people, the farmers, the factory workers, or the factory owners, I should say. And then there were the consumers, you know, who were the people who were going to get jobs and getting money and spending money on the products that are being produced. So that was a very simple model of an economy way back when. But there were some banking runs that occurred in the late 1800s. And some of the biggest money holders back then, J.P. Morgan, the Rothschilds, et cetera, got together in Jekyll Island secretly in 1913 and began to prepare the foundation for the Federal Reserve banking system that we know today. And they wanted to cut the tie from having gold to back the currency that we were using and have it what they call a fiat currency, where there was nothing backing it other than the voting capability of the public. A few years after that, when they set up this kind of fiat money system that was starting to, the First World War triggered its role heavily because they needed to generate cash so they could fund the First World War. So it began to flood the marketplace with fiat money. And that's what began to precipitate the Great Depression, because everything was going crazily good in the 1900s. Remember the Roaring I think it was the Roaring 20s they called it. Well, that's all because they were running on fiat money. I mean, they were smelling the fumes of prosperity, you know, but it wasn't real prosperity. Anyhow, it all came to a collapse. A big bubble burst. The Great Depression occurred. And during the Great Depression, there was a guy named John Maynard Keynes, who you've referred already, who believed that the government should be the third wheel. It should be the organization in the economy that should be bigger and more powerful, and that they could ramp up spending, government spending, during times when they needed to stimulate the economy so they could build roads and bridges and dams and whatever else. And when things were good and booming on its own, they could cut down the spending. And so that was what they call fiscal stimulus, which is government spending stimulus. And they would try to turn it on, turn it off according to what was needed at the time. That went on for a long time, and everybody was happy with it, it seemed to be. And, you know, not JFK, but FDR, you know, he invited John Maynard Keynes to come over to advise him. And, you know, because he was a Brit. He was from Britain, John Maynard Keynes. Later on, Milton Friedman, you may have known that name from the Chicago School. So back in the 70s, Milton Friedman became fairly popular. And he was advocating monetary policy, not fiscal policy, government spending, but managing interest rates through the expansion of money and shrinking of money in the economy. So the printing and the contraction of it. And so we ended up that second arm, or that second way of trying to manage the economy, either by government spending or by money management. When I went to University of Toronto and started studying that, I got both, because the guy that was Samuelson was the big advocate of the day. He's the most famous, I still have my textbook downstairs, the most famous economist of the time. And his textbook went on for years as being the book. And everything I learned in that was macroeconomics, microeconomics, according to Keynes and according to Milton Friedman. So that was the world that I had. I did not even know that the Austrian school existed, and which is really, the Austrian school is essentially what happened before these guys came into the picture. Didn't even know it existed until I joined the Libertarian Party, because, of course, the government does not want to advertise the fact that they are, you know, deemed to be playing the most crucial role, and it's in their own mind that they're the most crucial player in managing the economy, quote, managing the economy. And they use the central bank in Canada. It's the Bank of Canada, so that's our central bank, and they're managing the money supply too, and they're targeting interest rates and trying to target job creation and all this kind of stuff as well. But they can't do it effectively, unfortunately. You know, there's just far too many complexities, you know. So anyhow, I had a good base of monetarist theory, a good base of fiscal theory, but later got much, much more involved in the Austrian school, which does not feature either one of those roles of government as being a major player. So that's where I came from.
Well, that's good to know, at least at that particular time, that you were at least getting, like, you weren't getting your Austrian school and understand a pure, genuine freedom as far as economics, but at least you were given some variance. I would predominantly suggest today, and I can't say conclusively, but I've had other people, as far as their anecdotal experience or their personal experience, suggest that predominantly today it's the Keynesian model that seems to be the dominant aspect of any economic teachings in our education system, is the constant where you use central planning and the central bank as a means to basically, like, make up those short gap measures. But what I don't understand that's happening today in regards to the economics is the fact that you see, I mean, it's fairly obvious for anyone that's paying attention, even if you don't understand things from the macroeconomic aspect or the psychology of how that economic aspect should work, but you should at least understand that when you're talking to a world today when debt levels and deficit levels are so high that you're actually offloading. This is the part where economics is not when I hear people talk about it from the typical schools of proper education, nobody's talking about the intergenerational aspect of this constant turning over of debts and deficits and destroying the economic prosperity or viability of successive generations and hoping that they'll be creative or innovative enough that they'll be able to paint over and overcome all the past economic failures in the past. And that has happened, as you know yourself. That can happen if you create enough economic prosperity. You know, you can paint over some of the bad economic decisions of the central planners in the past, but that's still, you haven't probably affected the human psychology to do things more conducive with respecting each other economically. And that's the part that I think is most concerning to me, is that people aren't getting the philosophical or the psychological grasp of economics. That central planning sounds good in theory, because you think that, well, if you create this one size fits all, but then the problem is that no one's trying to explain to people that we're not robots. We're not the Borg. Humans are individuals, right? We have individual characteristics and traits that might be separate us from the collective or the group. So to me, it's whatever's conducive with respect in the individual, like I say, whether it's in the social realm or the economic realm, that's going to be conducive with allowing that person to create, you know, the next business model that might bring us. I mean, today they're even talking about these social media platforms. If we didn't have so much, and I mean, there's no doubt in my mind why people like Zuckerberg are even saying, no, please regulate the internet. They basically are saying that, yeah, we come up with a good economic model under the current structure, under the current paradigm, but the only way that'll continue going forward is if we can get ourselves into some kind of protective status, right? Which is what all the corporate hacks did in the past, is they want to get, once the government has regulated any particular industry, now you're basically picking winners or losers, because these lobbyists are going to be able to help define the rules or the underwriting of these rules. That's now going to keep them more entrenched. So to me, if we could get enough of the people that are coming out of our education systems today that are more conducive with understanding the concept of the Austrian school of thought, where it's like, just allow freedom. Just allow freedom. Don't be scared of the freedom. Just allow freedom to exist, and you'll see that it is much more predominant and will allow those kind of economic business models to flourish without being hampered or harmed by all this central planning or the manipulation of not just our currency, but the economy. Anyway, sorry, I know
Here's the challenge of that. Okay, the challenge of that is that when I went to University of Toronto studying economics, when I came through that program and learned Paul Samuelson's, understanding of economics at that time, I believed at that time that that was the only form of economics that there was. I had no idea. And so in a sense, well, of course, they didn't want me to know of any other options. When I look at the newspapers and that's supported by the politicians, they only emphasize the fiscal spending or the Keynesian spending, because that is the only area where they have any influence or control, because monetary control is handled by the Bank of Canada, which is not it's an arm's length from the government. So the politicians cannot affect that policy. And that's why they're never going to talk about it, because they have no control, no influence, nothing to do with the monetary policies. Okay. If the monetary policy was under government control, then you'd see the politicians talking about them just as much as they do about spending today. So that's why they always talk about stimulus, fiscal stimulus, fiscal spending, government spending. That's one of the reasons why people like Justin Trudeau. He feels that he's doing a great thing for Canadians by spending tons of money, because he thinks he's stimulating an economy that's not particularly strong. And it isn't strong. I mean, if you look at the economy since the 2008-2009 crash, it's never fully recovered. And the only reason why it looks even remotely being okay is because of all the stimulus that's been going on all this time. It's fake economic progress, and it's a bubble. It's likely going to burst at some point. So that's the issue. But certainly the Austrian school to me, I recently read a book by Stephen Harper, the book that he published last year, Right Here, Right Now. And I have a lot of respect for that man, a ton. And the reason for it is because he said some things in that book that really struck me as a person who's politically active. One is he said, he grew up in the Reform era. He was he had a lot of ideas that were quite libertarian. He wouldn't have declared himself a libertarian, and he doesn't today either, but a lot of his ideas certainly are libertarian. His favorite economist was Friedrich Hayek, which is one of the biggest names in the economic sphere for libertarianism and sound money. And so I watched him with interest because I saw a man that had some of the fundamental intellectual underpinnings, knowledge that I have and the interests. But after reading this book, he said, you know, when I was running for politics, I was running for a political party, and it was a conservative political party. And of course, I wanted the conservative political party to impose its values on society. But he said, but the moment I got elected and I became Prime Minister of Canada, I was the Prime Minister for every Canadian. I wasn't the Prime Minister for just the Conservatives who voted me into office. And he said, whenever I saw a problem and it needed us to address it, he said, I took my conservative hat and put it aside, and I looked at it from a man who's trying to do the best thing for all Canadians. That I respect, and I don't like collectivism. I know you don't either. I think collectivism is a problem, but given the fact that that man was in charge of a collectivist facility called the Government of Canada, at least he was showing that he was trying to be nonpartisan, and he was trying to make the right decisions. And I also began to appreciate just how complex those decisions were. Man, are they complex. Unbelievable. Well, we sit here in our armchairs thinking we've got the answers, but when you begin to understand all the moving parts of the issues that he deals with, you can't imagine the complexity these guys are dealing with, you know. So I have a lot of respect for them. When you get into office, you look around. It's like when I first ran for politics, you know, when I first got involved, I saw politics from a voter's point of view. But once I got inside the mechanism and saw how things were done inside, I had a completely different view of politics. Well, I can imagine what it must be like for him, you know, having been in power and having to deal with all those issues and having to deal with all those, you know, the media groups and his adversaries that went after him tooth and nail every day of his life for 10 years. I don't know how he survived that. Right now, Trudeau is getting the same stuff, but Trudeau, I think, deserves it. I don't think that Harper deserved anywhere near as much as the garbage that he got, you know?
Well, you know, as much as I've never been actually a big fan of the Harper, but that might very well be actually the problem with politics is not having this, because all they seem to care about when you're talking about politics is polling or trying to, you know, get yourself elected it's kind of counterintuitive to even be honest or forthright in your position, because as you're suggesting or alluding to, even if I started right now today, and I have kind of delved a little bit into it, but even if I come to the realization that during Harper's run, during that Harper era, that let's say he did have libertarian economic understanding and grasp, is, well, if you don't communicate that to the people, then to me, this is the problem, and why I support, like I say, the PPC and the Libertarian Party is, I don't care how it works out if you're at least honest and forthright with the people, because you got to remember, you're not just, when you're out there, you know, using the bully platform or talking, you know, using political talking points on the established media, is if you're forthright and you give your honest opinion,
right?
You're not playing politics. The people that are listening to that, well, it'll be conducive to give them the proper psychology, the proper thought process. Say, okay, maybe I might support Harper because he's playing the political realm, he's playing that game. But at least I understand what the underlying principles. But because he was very, like I say, but I don't expect, like I say, the people from that particular age demographic stuff to be very conducive to understanding of taking advantage of the social media and the fact that we live in the age of information. To me, it's like you're asking people that might have had some decent grasp, but they just didn't have the ability. It's sad, actually, and you probably know this yourself, is a man in his 80s now. Ron Paul was actually further ahead than most people today as far as people that want to put themselves in the political realm, as far as giving people a good understanding. You can be political. You can even still be, you know, a representative of the state or a part of the political class. But if you're more representative of being honest and give people a reason behind what you're doing, to me, that's the most important thing, which is why I respect you and Tim Moen, and not so much people like Stephen Harper, even though I recognize even today, if someone asked me today, well, if you had choice of Justin Trudeau or Harper, yes, I would definitely say, okay, Harper would, you know, hands over fist be, you know, higher as far as who I would want to be in power as opposed to Trudeau. But like I say, none of them. I haven't seen any political leaders other than what I've seen today. And it's not just what Maxime's saying today. I've also been one of those people that I look through his history, and I've seen that even I can find a YouTube video from him, just like I could find a YouTube video from Ron Paul that's still saying the same thing. So he's taking a principled position and he's not playing that game, not playing the political game, which Harper, I think at that time, and he realized because he was such a challenge against the liberals of the day, because they were, you know, people were sick of the liberals even back then. So he was taking advantage of the popularity and the position that he gained without actually taking advantage of using that to expand upon the knowledge and educate the Canadian people proper. That's where I think he failed. Right. But that's why hopefully we're not going to make that mistake again. And the PPC or anyone out there such as yourself, we're going to take advantage of actually informing and educating the people properly so that they're conducive with adopting these changes, even if it isn't fully practical as far as taking us to that area of individual liberty over a year or two.
Yes.
It might be a decade-long process, but at least if you're giving the message to the people, we'll all jump on board more quickly.
I think in Stephen Harper's case, I think he chose not to put a label on himself. So if he was to stand up and start saying, I believe these libertarian principles, all he does is he would have been confusing his message, because a lot of people didn't know what libertarianism stood for, and the media had already done a very good job of demonizing it. So you don't want to put labels on yourself that's going to make you look bad.
That is true, Gene.
Yeah, he's declared himself as a true conservative, and let's face it, there's a lot of things in conservative politics, conservative values that, you know, they're not the same as libertarianism, but there's certainly more in common with them than there are on the left, the political left. And so, but I also, when I read that book also talked a lot about the traditions of conservatism and where it came from. And I've read another book since by a PhD from about 1950s who had sort of wrote the seminal book on conservatism. And so I see conservatism differently than I did before. I'm still a libertarian, and I always will be a libertarian in terms of the values that I uphold. But I also see that there is a lot of merit in some of the conservative philosophy, and I'm not going to ignore good ideas when I see them. I don't care where they come from. I don't really care what labels put on them. You know, if there are good ideas coming from any party and they're going to help individuals in our society to be more successful and happier and get along with each other, you know, as long as they're not going to violate the non-aggression principle, they're not going to hurt other people, is what I'm saying. As long as they don't do that, you know, I'm open to any discussion, you know. And but I certainly agree with him. I'm not planning to put the libertarian label across my forehead during this election, even though I am still a libertarian and I'm a member of the Ontario Libertarian Party, and that's not going to finish, you know. But I do want to talk about the ideas that count, and I don't really care where they come from, to be honest with you.
Right on. Okay, so in addition to that, and actually very appreciative of all that, because this is something that I think is profoundly important to bring these topics and issues up, is to help affect people's mindset in regards to even some of the former leaders, like you say. Yeah, even what you're saying now kind of gives me a little bit more to think about and chew on as food for thought at some point in time in the future. Because like I say, I can be pragmatic as much as I prefer, you know, principles over just a political statement. But I get that, you know, you have to be conducive that's what's going to be the best method going forward. And I understand that you can't, even myself, which is why I've said, people have asked me, lots of people have said, why don't you delve into the political frame or less? But I don't think I'm actually at this particular time, this particular junction, in an area where I don't think it would be beneficial, because I would probably be more open to saying things that would be counterproductive as far as if we are trying to at least head down that path, because most Canadians, as you realize, don't even understand the grasp of some of the concepts that we're talking about. Even conservatism or liberalism or libertarianism. Yeah. Take libertarian, even just liberal or conservative. Most people don't even know what that even actually means. They won't even take 2 seconds of their day to just Google search it or look through a dictionary. Yeah. They just go by what some political hack tells them that what it's supposed to mean, right? And that to me, that is a problem. But I understand, and I'm completely on board, which is why, like I say, I've been much more pragmatic in the last year and a half, as far as accepting and adopting the fact that there has to be at least a multi-pronged approach. And the political aspect is something that's, like I say, it's a representation of reality. So we have to use the political process as best as we can to propagate the message of individual freedom and liberty. And like I say, whether it comes through Harper and some of the policies that he implemented under his time frame that might have helped some people at that time, or Maxime Bernier or yourself and the Libertarian Party of Canada. To me, as long as we can get people starting to adopt and understand that we have to have the conversation about these things, because that really, at the end of the day, what it is no one's having these big chats, these big conversations. I think that's actually, before we get to the point where we're going to decide how policies are going to go forward, is we got to have these kind of big town halls or these big meetings where people like from all sides of the political spectrum are sitting down and having kind of political dialogue and debate. Right now, everyone seems to run to their political perspective corners and want to ignore or counter or combat each other, which, like I say, hopefully we'll get past that point and we'll start to come together and take advantage of the fact that we live in the age of information. And like I say, if you're a socialist or communist or anyone, just what is your message? What do you want? And what's the best plan of attack where we can make sure that, you can benefit yourself and everyone else without, causing harm to others. Really, at the end of the day, I think most of us, even the people that are on the wrong side of the political spectrum, is just they've been taught the wrong things. I think they have, a lot of them have good intentions. They've just been taught the wrong recipes for success. That is the problem. I think that is where we're going to have to get to the point where we're having these kind of conversations and debates, and hopefully that'll be something that'll happen going forward. But anyways, in addition to that, I just wanted to touch down on, so you obviously mentioned that you're part of the Libertarian Party of Canada, and your history in regards to that.
I'm Ontario Libertarian Party.
Or sorry, Libertarian Party of Ontario.
Yeah.
And you were a liberty advocate and as an editor for Libertarians in Ontario at Freebird Media. So this is
right.
Yeah. So actually, Alex, this is one of those guys that actually I tried to reach out to this young man actually back in the day, because it looked like he was going a little bit towards the identitarian kind of side. And it's like he seemed like a very smart young man. I believe he is. I'm not even trying to insult his intelligence by any stretch. Right. But it did seem that he wanted to be more conducive with trying to find a tribe. And that is the part that I've seen, which is really difficult for people that do advocate for libertarian thought or philosophy, is because we all come across as being independent, it's not conducive with the umbrella of a big group, of a big family, of a big tribe. And that's the part where I see where a lot of these people might reject us, because it seems like, they're not going to be accepting of everything I say because they'll hold me to account. Whereas other people, just by sheer fact of some identity aspect of the color of my skin or my heritage, well, they'll accept and adopt me into their group. So as much as, like I say, I respect people like these people and offering their opinion or message, is the fact that people like that are willing to ignore or even use divisive narratives towards even people like myself, which he has done subsequent to me, is how do we help these younger people that are really, and that's really the ultimate question, is how do we help these people? What do you think is the best approach or best method to help these younger people that are very confused and realize that they need to belong to something? Because I think most of us, like I say, whether it's in your family structure or social structure of any form, is you want to feel a sense of belonging. Is how can we create an atmosphere that's conducive with that to a degree, but they don't have to feel that they have to conform so easily, so readily, where they'll reject other people's stances or positions.
I'm glad you brought up Freebird Media, because the answer is partially in that what they're doing there. And I'll explain to you why I agreed to be in that sub portion of their site. They came to me a while back. They actually came to the Libertarian Party of the Ontario Libertarian Party, and they said that they wanted to create a number of child sites that would be under their main site, and they wanted to do it for every political party that ran last June in the provincial party, so that they could have this kind of one site where everybody can go to see what different political parties have to say about policy and ideas. So there were 26 political parties that were registered with Elections Ontario last year, and you only heard about 3 or 4 of them. So if you wanted to know about all 26 of them, then the idea would be that if you went to Freebird Media and you saw the name Libertarian, you could drill down and you could see what we're posting. And of course, I'm the editor of that page, and so that the kind of content that will show up on that page will be controlled by me. If there's a lot of things that I don't approve of, it won't get to be shown. But I do encourage discussion. To me, I want young people to look at all choices I want our ideas to resonate with them, but I'm not them. I mean, they've got their own backgrounds, their own life lens. They look at the world through every experience they've had up to this point. So I can't superimpose my views on them. All I can do is plant the seeds and hope that they will compare us to all the other parties, and that what we're saying will resonate with them. That will do a couple of things. One is I think it'll encourage more young people to vote. Secondly, I think it'll help them to vote with a sense of personal responsibility and investigation, so that they're really. I want them to grow in their awareness and knowledge of the governing organizations in their life. Okay, the more they understand what the governing institutions are trying to do, the more likely they're going to say, I don't want them to do those things for me. I want them to do some things for me, but I don't want them to do all these things for me. So I want to have some choice, and they back off, get them to back off on areas that they have no business being in my life. The only way you're going to get young people or older people or anybody for that matter is by helping them to understand the role of government in their life, understand when the role of government has overstepped their they're trespassing on your personal space because they've done it through laws, right? You got to stop that. There's got to be a point where you can just say, okay, guys, we've gone far enough. You've already superimposed all these taxes on me. You've superimposed a lot of services that I don't take care of, I don't use. So let's kind of roll this back and let me choose which ones I want and which ones I'm not willing to pay for and not accept. That to me is the essence of democracy for me, by the way. We need to allow individual human beings with individual circumstances, individual jobs, individual religious beliefs, it's all determined by every factor in their life, to make their own choices for themselves and not allow a collectivist umbrella be dumped on our heads and expect us to obey under the collectivist regime. I'm all about individual choice and personal responsibility and liberty. Those are the things that matter to me, and that's the kind of world I'm hoping that we'll shape. It'll take a big effort, of course, as you know. If you look at the Libertarian Party of Canada, which is mostly an ANCAP party, they are so far away from what the reality is of our current world is that the road to get from where they are today to somehow get to bridge the gap between what we have in our public institutions today, that road is so vast that there's just no way you can get, But if you look at the People's Party of Canada, we're on the same road. We do want to cut back on how much interference the government's going to take on in our lives. We just haven't defined how far that's going to go,
Yeah, well, actually, it's perfectly like I was even suggesting earlier. That's to me, which is why I find it so strange, and which is why like I say, I love most of the libertarians in Canada and that are representatives of the party. But to me, it's the weirdest thing to even have I wish, if I had a choice in the matter, not that I suggest I should, because I'm not a dictator by any stretch of the imagination, but to me, libertarians, especially people such as like Tim Owen and such, is like, just come at things from a philosophical concept. But I get it. The political platform will get you a little bit more of a stage, right? But to me, that's the thing is I'm completely on board with people that want to combat things with that purest philosophical understanding in regards to individual liberty. But then when you try to bring it into the political realm, it does create a massive area of confusion because you're dealing with the political realm, and you can't. If you try to go completely honest with them in the political realm, then you're going to sound, like I said, then you're going to sound like someone that's standing up there with the cloth saying that I don't believe in God, which is, it's just like, that's the part, which is why, like I say, I don't know how you make a political party that's based on libertarian philosophy or thought. How do you even make that happen? I don't know. That might happen at some point in time in the future when humans have evolved past the concepts of the past. Right. Go ahead.
Let me answer the question for you, because I think I've got an answer that will satisfy you, okay? So if you look at any political party, there's two ways to bring about change. One way is what I call the inside job. So the inside job is to run for office, get elected, go to Queen's Park or go to Ottawa, sit in Parliament and fight for the bill changes that you want. That's the inside job. That's what you get paid for. That's where you spend all of your days doing whatever you have to do to try to move those balls forward, Then there's the outside job. And the outside job is for philosophers like you and me, okay? As much as I would love to get to Ottawa, and to try to make that difference there and do the inside job, which I've never had even a remote chance of doing in the past as a libertarian, but the outside job is doing exactly what you are doing right now, which is helping people to understand the choice that libertarianism is all about, discussing all the fine points, getting opinions from different people, so that people in the greater population will grow in their understanding. And when it comes to voting, when it comes to putting somebody in the chair, the inside job, the choices they're going to make are far better. So you're already a politician. You're already doing it without actually putting, running someplace in some riding. One of the reasons why I ran the first time as a Libertarian is because I had been what I called a compromise conservative for many years. Compromise being that the Conservative Party did not give me what I wanted, but it was the best that was available. So that's the only choice I had. But what I wanted was a lot more freedom along the lines that you've read in my stuff. And so somebody said, well, Gene, if you really want a less government person to vote for in your riding, why don't you be that candidate? Why don't you put your name up there and be there? And I thought about it for a while, and I didn't feel like a public figure. I didn't feel like I wanted to put myself on a soapbox and start talking to masses of people. But what I did realize is I realized that if there is not a less government choice, whether it's PPC or whether it's Libertarian, doesn't matter. If there is not a less government choice on every election ballot in this country, then we do not have democracy. All we have is parties that are going to continue to grow and expand the state. But at some point, you have to be able to give the people the choice. Do you want less government too? Is that something you're really interested in? If that choice is not on the ballot, then you've got an autocracy of expanding government. That's all you have. So
well said, Gene.
So I put my name on the ballot lots of times because, and the first time I ran, I got 636 votes. These are people who didn't know me, right? But what it told me was there's a lot of folks out there that want less government, that took the time to find out. And I was the only one that stood up and was willing to give them the chance to put an X on the box, not for my name, didn't matter who I was. It was for the ideas. And so if you decide to run in the future, you can be that proxy. You can be the guy that's putting your name forward for a set of ideas. And if it was as a Libertarian, for example, the chances of you getting elected are a zip. It's not going to happen, okay? But the chances of you getting your message out there and people paying more attention to what you're talking about today, chances go way up. You might get 636 people who never knew you before. You might get 2,000 people. You don't know. But you're getting the message out about liberty. That's the name of the...
So well said, Gene. And actually, since you brought that up, actually, I wanted to mention to anyone that's watching the video today is I'm very appreciative of your writings, and it's predominantly on the Facebook platform. So if you're watching this video, Gene Balfour, if you look him up and you see some of the writings he puts out there, this is a man that takes the time to articulate his message and his thoughts and put them in text form that's conducive for, like I say, don't matter what area of thought or your intellectual level or capacity is it's going to be something that will resonate with you for sure. Because like I said, I've paid attention for basically a decade now with pretty much anyone in Canada that seems to be concerned about individual rights, freedom, and liberty. And you are one of the people definitely at the forefront of someone that I see that's willing to put in the hard work and effort. And you do it time and time and time again. And I'll just say for myself, I'm very appreciative of all those posts you put. Because I'm not even a big fan of the typing I used to years ago, do like big long things. And I'm just not a fan. So I prefer to use the verbal speech, which is why I'm more conducive with videos and stuff. But when I see people that can articulate the thoughts so well, such as someone like yourself, and put that in text form, which is something that people are more conducive today because you see them on social media and they be looking. But like I say, as long as you're getting your message out there, to me, that's the most important thing. And it's nice to see that there are people like you can do that in a manner that someone like myself maybe not predominantly predisposed to do. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that there's someone that's willing to not just articulate message in text form, but be patient in the way you do it. Because that's another thing I've noticed with you. You're very patient with people and anyone that wants to learn things. That, once again, I bow to someone like yourself in your patience and your ability to do that. Because I always recognize I have strengths and I have faults. Like I'm just like every other human being. There's some areas where I have some pretty good strengths, but there's other areas where no, I'm gonna yield to someone such as Gene here, and he'll be able to help me out in that in particular endeavor. And you're someone, like I say, that's at the forefront of not just putting your thoughts on pen and paper, but in text form. But even as you see today, even in the verbal context, that you have an easy manner about yourself. That's, you've never get, upset or outrageous. And to me, I put a little bit of passion, but I love the fact that you bring it with a much more calm, cool, collective manner as far as, putting forth and presenting your ideas. To me, that's like, I'm glad that you're out there. Cause like at the end of the day, just like you were alluded to earlier, I don't care if anyone ever cares about remembering me, my name, as long as the ideas are what matters most. And that's the area you're coming at it from. So yeah, it's not a matter of promoting Gene or promoting Bennett or even the party per se. It's about promoting ideas, and whoever is going to be adoptive and on board with promoting these ideas, then yeah, let's put aside all of our little petty differences. Just like I said, I realized this about a year and a half ago. Rather than playing this purist thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to virtue signal that I'm way more of a libertarian than everyone else, right? Which to this day, I still like. I still have to knock myself back down and say, okay, no, that's not the point. That's not the point. Let's be pragmatic. It just whatever is going to be conducive with getting more and more people to adopt and understand the ideas or the philosophy of liberty. That to me, that's what matters most.
Yep.
And you're definitely one of those people that are the forefront in this country as far as doing that, and in a manner that's not just articulate, but conducive and patient. So thank you, Gene, tremendously for that. I'm going to move on to the next question here for you there. So liberty advocates, or sorry, your political history and your, okay, no, never mind. I'll go on to the next one. So what do you believe that the People's Party of Canada, why do you believe that People's Party of Canada is the right choice for Canada at this time? That's actually a very important question, because people are like, you know, come 2019 in October, and this is going to, you know, go right to that split in the vote perspective. But why do you believe it's important today to make sure that the People's Party of Canada gets a large, substantial portion, and not just the people that are disenfranchised from the political parties today, but even the ones that are stuck in that paradigm and don't know which way to pivot or turn, because they realize today, and a lot of them are, and that's the thing with the conservatives today, is they realize that they might want to support Scheer, but they recognize some of them at least must understand these basically just that the other wing of the same, what they call libcon bird. These are entrenched political parties that have been playing this volleying back and forth of playing the power structure and the power paradigm. So like, okay, well, the liberals can take it for this long. But once again, the ideas of liberty aren't actually getting expanded or espoused properly or articulated properly. It's just this race to who can garner the biggest collective gang. And to me, that's not conducive with creating the kind of freedoms that people like us or that large disenfranchised community of Canadian population, which is what? About 40%. I think there's anywhere, you know, on typical between federal politics, usually on that time frame is 8 to 10 million Canadians are completely disenfranchised. So representation of 35 to 40% of the population. So how can we use this party as a means to entice or bring those people, or the ones that are disenfranchised, with the party? What is the method of the PPC, and what do you think is most conducive that's going to allow that to happen within the paradigm of the PPC?
That's a really important question, because that's really, I think, the thing that draws the PPC as being very different. And Max talks about doing politics different. That's his catchphrase. And he's right about it, and just the way he's doing it. And what's different about it is that the Liberals, predominantly the Liberals under Trudeau, prior to him getting elected, the governments were at least trying to deal with real issues, real problems. But he's really shifted the entire dialogue of the nation politically to identity politics. He's trying to divide and conquer Canadian people politically by identifying our differences, even though he says that differences are, what does he say? Trudeau talks about that our differences are really our greatest strength. Well, if you keep highlighting our differences, and if you keep pitting one group against another group because of their differences, then all you do is you balkanize the country. You break them into groups that are going to see each other fighting over the scraps of government handouts and government regulations and that sort of thing. Max doesn't believe in that. He wants to bring together a Canadian without using identity politics. He wants a Canada that everybody can look at each other with respect, can respect individual capabilities of every individual, so they can be prosperous and they can make a good life for themselves. He said this whole idea of freedom, responsibility, respect, and fairness, those four qualities, those four values are the guts of what he's talking about. And he's the only party that's promoting policies or at least, values like that. I haven't seen any other party that really builds their political platform on a basis of principles and values. And this is the first time I've seen one really do it and do it well. The other thing about it is that I think that everybody who's being drawn to the PPC are the people who have been associated with other political parties, but have come to the realization that all parties now have been drifting left, and that includes the Conservatives. And so we've left at this time in Canada's history, we've left this massive gap in the political spectrum on the right of the political spectrum. It's been there was a time when the Conservatives were on the center right, but I would say they're straddling the center line today. And because that gap exists, there's this massive void that you can just feel that void is not present in our media, it's not present in our political dialect, and more and more people are seeing that. I see I'm on Facebook quite a bit, and I see the absolute unbelievable level of anger towards Trudeau, and it's similar to the kind of anger that people felt towards Kathleen Wynne last year when she lost. Now she had the worst popularity rating of any premier in Ontario's history, and I'm beginning to wonder whether Trudeau is going to match that capability, because people are disgusted really with his identity politics and his mismanagement of government resources, and a lot of the programs that he's running are poorly executed. He's got a spending problem that he doesn't seem to be able to stop. It seems to be out of control. And Maxime Bernier is exactly the opposite. He's the man who's basically saying we can't let the identity politics take over. We cannot let the government run amok with spending. And so he's serious about it. I mean, this man is not, well, you followed him in the last 10 years. His message has not changed. So this is not somebody who's doing this and saying these things because he wants to get elected. This is a man who's saying these things because this is in his DNA. I mean, this is who he is, And
yeah, you're definitely not taking a libertarian stance if you just want to get elected today, because personal accountability and responsibilities, that is not actually a politically viable position to take. Yeah. Well, not for at least if you want to play that minority or the majority game, right? That's actually the problem. But yeah, I'm very, like I say, that's one area that, like I say, and it is a long-term prospect and project for us, for those of us that are doing that, is to get not just people from our own demographic, but even successive and younger generation to get more conducive with accepting and owning up to that personal responsibility side of the equation. Because, and a lot of people have kind of alluded this in the past, is they've been taught to think more about getting rights or their freedoms, but without the actual underlying principle that you need to. Personal responsibility is the only way that actually happens. That's actually the problem, is you keep a lot of the political class, or even those in academia, the activists, the professors and such, is they're talking about, you should be wanting all these freedoms, but they're not actually pointing out the importance of that personal responsibility. Because just like even myself, if you want to reduce the size and scope of the state, I just think back into the small communities that I grew up in New Brunswick, is the state, it wasn't that people were actively trying to deny the larger ramp up in growth in government. It's just that they were more conducive with taking care of each other, because they had a respect for people in the community, and they realized that, hey, if I help out my neighbor, well, that's an investment for me in the future, that if I do that for them, they're going to want to reciprocate that and show that kindness back to me at some point. Now, if I go through a hardship, so that you get that reciprocal relationship, that's not a top-down authoritarian practice that comes through the political realm. It just comes from the fact of doing things because I'm not doing it just because it's going to benefit me now, but it's going to benefit me tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. And that's the part, like I say, that's more conducive with, you don't have to, people say, well, how can we shrink government? Well, in reality, you don't actually need to write new policies. Well, that will be something that'll be subsequent to come after the fact. But what it is you just got to own up and be more personally responsible in your life. So if there's someone that needs help and you don't want them to turn or pivot towards government to get that help, well, the onus is on you or people in your community to help those people that are in need. And that's the way that you'll do it. So rather than them have to be forced to go to the government to seek help, that was the beautiful thing about churches or friendly societies in the past, is you step up the plate, and that's what kept big government at bay. But today, because everyone seems to have this pretense that we just offload that responsibility to the state, because the state is such a representation and large factor in our life, that people no longer feel that personal responsibility or accountability for taking care of not just themselves, but like I say, using not just your benevolence economically, even though actually it's not even a benevolence or altruistic, it's even if it's just a benefit to yourself, but because if you want to benefit yourself, like I don't know if you've ever owned a business. I've owned a business. People that have never owned a business, they think that business owners are what? Just like rich guys, just like, no, you have no idea. As an employee, to be honest with you, I've worked with more people as an employee than I've ever, as far as owned a business. As an employee, I only have to cater to one person, my own boss. That's it. As an employer, I have to cater to whether I have employees, but also the customer base. So actually, anyone that's ever undertaken a business venture or a business model and become personally responsible to what they want to do and place their ideas in the economic realm, you realize that actually it doesn't give you this pretense of power or authority. It gives you the pretense of understanding of how the actual real world functions, which is why I think a lot of conservatives understand the economic side of things, because they predominantly come from the business world. Is that it's not a matter of me using, now the ones that use government as a means to, benefit themselves economically and get some lobbying favors to create legislation that will give them a more monopolistic aspect as far as their particular industry. But for those of us that have ever functioned in the private sector, it's more conducive for you, that's beneficial to your community, if you're willing to not just do what's best for you, because you're going to want to, like I say, be compensated economically for any product or service that you provide, but you're also great in something that's a benefit to your community. And everyone that walks away from that interaction, that transaction, feels like they have benefited as a result. So they're not going to look like they need to pivot towards big government once again. And if we can bring that into the social realm, once again, it used to be the churches in the past. You didn't need government to give you a sense of morality. That's what church leaders were once used to be, or, father figures in your home, or your mother, or maybe your grandmother, or whoever it was. But instead of turning and pivoting towards government as a means to be your moral authority, we have to get back to an understanding, like I say, whether you want to use objectivism, like someone such as Ayn Rand, or UP, like Stefan Molyneux, or even some of the foundational aspects of Christianity, which is basically what our Western democracies have been founded upon. Even today, people don't really know this, but if you go even to this day in 2019 and look at our Constitution and the Bill of Rights, it still says there the supremacy of God in the rule of law. So it's the concept of having an ideal. Like God to me, you don't have to get into the religious aspect, but God to me is an ideal of what we should do as far as how we treat each other and interact with each other economically or socially. And if we can make that somewhere outside the realm of politics or outside the realm of the state, then we can do exactly what you're trying to do and what Maxime's trying to do, and reduce the size and scope of the state and how much effect it has in our social economic lives. But we have to adopt that personal responsibility, and we have to be leaders that are going to show how you get yourself in that position. And that's the area where, like, politics is going to play a role for sure. But what you do in your personal life, what you do as far as what you upload on your Facebook pages, I think is going to be just as conducive as what you're going to bring to the table as far as being a candidate for the PPC. So in that area, in that regard, I'm appreciative of not just you being a PPC candidate, but what else you'll bring to the table.
My last 9 years of employment, when I retired full-time, retired a year ago, was with a company called R3D Consulting, which is a Canadian consulting firm based in Montreal. They've been in business for more than 20 years when I joined them, and they had about 500 employees at the time. And I joined the Toronto office as the director of the talent supply chain. So what that meant was, it was my job to find people for consulting assignments that they required. And they were both full-time employees, but they were also contract workers as well. And we launched, my boss and I, Jean-Yves Drochet and I, we launched the international division in the United States. What that was we were putting in brand new computer systems through project teams that I was assembling and finding in automotive manufacturing plants. So this is replacing all their computer systems, their enterprise computer systems, with a solution that was based on SAP, which is one of the world's largest enterprise software companies. And these would be 4 or 5 month projects. And we did almost 100 manufacturing plants, automotive parts manufacturing plants in Brazil, in Mexico, United States, a couple in Canada, and also in France. And it was that experience of building a business that was essentially didn't exist when I came on board, to being a $15 million US per year business by the time I was finishing it. That experience of really understanding how to build and then assemble a really, really top-notch management and consulting team that really got me to understand that the dynamics of what it took to be successful in business. The profit and loss, the decisions you had to make. And these are decisions that were not being made once every week. It's decisions you were making 4 or 5 times a day, business is incredibly dynamic. And what I've found over the years is for people who have spent most of their life in the public sector, like Kathleen Wynne, for example, who spent probably 35 years in the government, she probably never has known a business where her income was dependent upon profit and loss. She's never known a business where having to continually fine-tune the business organization to adapt to the changes of the marketplace and to compete in that marketplace so they can compete successfully and survive, keep all the jobs that are already there, because survival is dependent upon being profitable. She had none of those pressures. So when she looked at the world around her, all she could see was a world that would be based on the understanding of how a government operates. Mm-hmm. It does understand how you as a businessman would operate and what faces that you deal with. And it's one of the reasons why I like to see people who have in the political sphere who have had a mixture of involvement with the public sector and understanding it, but also, more importantly to me, an understanding of what it takes to survive in business, and how difficult it is. It's how challenging it is, particularly today. It's getting harder and harder because competition is moving faster and faster than it ever did. And there's a lot more moving parts now. We've got now a lot of international competition. We have outsourcing. We've got artificial intelligence technologies. We got all kinds of stuff that are coming at us all the time. So it's a very different paradigm to live your life in. That's what I'm bringing to the table. I'm bringing the fact that every job in the public sector is paid for by taxes that are derived from business people like you and me and other people who are generating the wealth in the economy. That's where it comes from. If you do not have that very strong business environment within which entrepreneurs and corporations and businesses can operate successfully, then you jeopardize everything that we have in this country. You know, all of our social programs, all of the jobs that we have in the public service that people want to protect, you know, all those things are jeopardized if you do not have the source of revenue to continue to pay for them. And so when I look at everything in terms of policy, when I look at Maxime Bernier's plans, and by the way, before I agreed to run for the PPC, there were about 45 policy ideas on their website. And I went through them one by one, and I took notes. And what I was doing is I was asking myself, can I, as a citizen and as a libertarian thinking person, could I accept this policy, this idea? Or would I oppose it? Would I fight it? And I went through every single one, about 45 of them, and there was not a single one that I disagreed with. There are ones that I might want to see stronger, but I never disagree with one of them. And so I knew at that point that I could stand in front of an audience of people in this riding, and I could talk to those ideas and those principles and really believe them, really feel they're right, and really speak with passion to make sure that people understood that I'm not just a politician up there trying to win votes to put me into a nice 106. You know how much you get paid as an MP? It's $160,000 as the base salary, right? Really? Yeah. You know, I mean, a lot of people could say that's a pretty strong reason to go out there and run for political office, but I don't care. That's not what I'm doing it for. I'm doing it because I believe in the values and the ideas of Maxime Bernier's behind, and I can stand shoulder to shoulder with that man and talk about the things that he's trying to do. Believe me.
Well said, Gene. Well said. Like I say, the more I talk to you, the more I realize that you definitely, at least, especially in your particular writing, the people are in good hands. At least if you get voted in, that's the key factor. And I'm sure, like I say, I'm sure with you going around and the people that you'll surround yourself with, like I say, as long as you're presenting good ideas, and you're definitely seeing today, even though they're trying to put a lot of political spin on it, all the polls are suggesting, and just the political reality that we're seeing. I mean, people are disenfranchised with the current system, and you can see they're just desperate. I mean, there's you got a couple of them. That's the hilarious part. They're trying to act like there's this new wave of green. a couple candidate is not a wave, folks. But all it does say to me, it does suggest that the entrenched established parties, they're the ones that are definitely should be concerned, because people are chomping at the bit, because even though most people aren't conducive with the knowledge to understand why the problems are existing today, they're at least acknowledging that problems exist. So that's what the area where we got to step up to the plate and offer them the proper ideas and the reasoning behind why they should start pivoted towards, like you say, the PPC and supporting alternative platforms, because we're not looking to, that's the thing about the PPC and people such as yourself or myself or anyone else that's part of the PPC, We're not looking to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're not trying to upend the system or create a violent revolution or something where we're going to cause a whole lot of harm to a whole lot of people. We just want to keep people psychologically and philosophically onto the understanding of the freedom aspect of individual liberty, and then just at least start all heading down that path. That's really all we want to do. And I think with people like yourself and Maxime out there giving people a good articulate message and explaining that, listen, this is just about respecting you as the individual and giving you the best chance in life. And there's no guarantee. That's the thing. There's no guarantee that everything's going to be conducive for giving you good economic prosperity or meaning or fulfillment in your life. But this is the path that's going to at least allow you that opportunity that's best. How you take it, what you do with it after or subsequent to that, the onus is on you. And how you're going to use that to benefit not just yourself, but your community, your family, and your society. But that's what I love about the PPC and the fact that they even use the People's Party Canada. Some people said, well, that sounds very communistic. Well, no, it's just people. Why? That's the thing. Communists pretended that they were all about the people, but as we know today, that actually wasn't conducive with their thing. It was just a pretense. But just because you want to support and respect the people does not mean that it's collectivist in nature. I think it just means that you want to give people a voice. And at the end of the day, if you are someone that perceives yourself as just someone that's a representation of a member of society, then that means you. And if you want to accept and embrace the ideas of individual liberty, which means you don't have to pick a group, which means you don't have to divide Canada up into all these subcategories, to me, I think that's conducive. And I've talked to people from many different areas and backgrounds that even I had an interview with a first generation gentleman last weekend. I think he was from Pakistani or Indian descent, and he said the same thing. It's about the ideas. It has nothing to do with putting yourself in a political group or an identity politics type tribe. It's about something that's conducive with individual rights, freedoms, and liberty. And to me, that's the best thing, because then you don't have to play the politics of envy or division, and you can play the kind of game that's about inclusivity and unity. And that, to me, what Maxime Bernier says, which to me is the same thing. And I've used the example is if you were going to sit down and play a board game, I want us all to play by the same rules. That's all. And Maxime's saying, I just want us all to play by the same rules without giving anyone exceptions or catering to a particular group or a tribe or someone that might, oh, look, a poll said that these people will vote for me if I cater or coddle them. No, Maxime's saying is this is the part. Personal responsibility and accountability, but at the same time, that what comes with that personal accountability and responsibility, you're going to step up and play. You're going to have to take that onus upon yourself. But what comes with that is a tremendous amount of freedom and unity, because it means that we perceive each other as individuals rather than collectives or tribes, which is what you're seeing today. This identity politics is completely destroying the fabric of unity in this country, and it's doing it to not just Canada, but the entire Western world, which I don't think is right, because we're much better and much more aligned with each other and are much more conducive with respecting each other as we feel we have a single solitary at least goal. How you want to get to your goal, individual, do your thing. But as long as at the end of the day, our goals are ultimately the same, where we just want to treat each other with respect as an individual, that's the best path forward. And that's what the PPC represents. And that's why I think that we are maybe, actually, that's why I'm going to tie into this next question. I don't know what it's going to mean for the 2019 election, but I definitely know it's a foundation that's going to be something that we can build on going forward, which is going to take me, like I say, this last question. So what are your realistic prospects for success in this election for your candidacy as the PPC candidate in your riding and for the PPC in general?
Well, I mean, we are a new party, and that's a fact. It's a reality. Because we're a new party, we have a lot of marketing to do to be able to get people to know that we exist. So that's one of the obstacles that we face, and that's going to come down to our ability as politicians to organize campaigns to get our message out so people will know we exist. And as you mentioned before, there's a certain percentage of the population that has interest in politics, and there's a whole whack of people that don't care about politics at all. And they would probably, even if they heard the name PPC, they wouldn't be curious enough to even know what it is. So, and I've met lots of people like that. They just their lives are preoccupied with other things, and that's the way it is for them. And I respect that. That's who they are, and that's where we're coming from. But in the end, I certainly would love to win this riding. I know I've got a very strong challenge because I've got a sitting MP, Jamie Schmale is the guy who's the elected Conservative who's sitting in Ottawa right now, and he's been around for a long time. And so he's got, he's got a lot of connections and a lot of political capital that I don't have. But I think I've also got a ton to offer people if they take the time to listen to what we're talking about. I think that in Jamie's case, if the Conservatives were to win, then he will be one vote, or he'll be one vote in the caucus or in that. But the idea of him going into Ottawa, being able to adequately represent the voice of everybody in this riding, when Andrew Scheer will be, focusing on the nation, I think that there will not be. He won't be able to. He'll probably have to toe the line more often than he'd like, and maybe compromise on what the people from Kawartha Lakes, Halbert and Kawartha Lakes would want and what I've told him. In my case, if I go there, I will not be, pushed by Andrew Scheer or anybody else about, I'm going to fight for the people in my riding to be able to do the things that are going to bring the kind of prosperity that I know our policies can bring, and the kind of cohesiveness that I know our policies can bring. And I can do that without having to be corralled. And so I've got a lot more freedom than he has. And I don't think he realizes that. And I don't think he realizes, too, that I'm a proactive guy. I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. Being a recruiter, you get comfortable after a while, I'm very much a results-oriented guy, and I love to network. I mean, I'm a networking guy by nature just because recruiting made me that way. So for me to get out there and try to find a way to be able to get our ideas amongst the people in Ottawa that can finally get bills passed, I think I've got a lot of advantages he doesn't have, and that's going to come out in the election. So I think he's going to be facing a much bigger challenge to overcome what the PPC has to say and what I have to say during the election coming.
Well, I tell you, if I was living in your riding, you'd definitely be getting my vote. Well, I will be voting for the PPC candidate in my riding regardless, because I definitely, like I say, that's one step that I want to take. And actually, to be honest with you, I've only voted, I think, 2 times ever in my life, because most of the time I was one of those people that's representative of disenfranchised from the political process entirely.
Yeah.
But like I say, because I'm like, I can't ignore and avoid politics, and I've learned all that stuff in recent years. Is at the very least, even though I still will maintain my kind of principal position, and I still don't think politics is the leading edge as far as change and affecting culture. I think a lot of the time, and I'm sure you agree, as actually this is the void that I see that's actually contributing to the people's mass confusion is. There isn't even, whether it's in the music realm or television or radio or movies, where is even yourself, being someone from being an older gentleman like myself, is throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there was lots of cultural aspects that were teaching people to stand against big government, right, and stuff. But there is no counterculture that seems to be dominant today other than us. We exist, and really those are us. We are the ones, I guess, which is why we're taking center stage and why we've become popular on social media platforms stuff, is because we seem to be the ones that are more conducive with, playing that countercultural role and pushing back against the establishment or the status quo, but to me, we need to bring that to the forefront in so many different areas, which is the area where I think the leftists, that's the part that I see where these people that are on the left side of the political spectrum is they're much more conducive with the creative side of things. And it's like, I wish they would adopt and get on board rather than, donning a black mask, right?
Yeah.
And, fucking flying a stupid communist flag or some shit. Get outside of that stupid paradigm and just get on board with, doing the kind of things that and be constructive and creative, because these people have a lot of creative aspects that they have that can bring to the forefront. It's just that, like I say, certain people have created this divide where they feel that they've got to fight people like us. In reality, like I say, this is the part where we need to have these kind of conversations. I'm sure you'll do this even when you're out there, canvassing or talking to the people, is people that are even, socialists in nature, or people that are, disenfranchised and maybe say that they're a liberal or an NDP. I'm sure if you were sit down and talk with them and they heard the kind of things that you espouse and what the PPC represents, I think a large percentage of them, or at least a decent percentage of them, would be completely on board and say, yeah, I'm completely agreeing with you as far as I don't want to maintain this current structure. So that's, like I say, that's the area where I think the PPC has the best chance to get people not just from the right side of the political spectrum, but from the left, and the ones that are completely disenfranchised. And you are going to be a beautiful, excellent spokesman for doing that, because you don't come at things from a dominant side of the political spectrum. You come about it from the like a libertarian thought or the philosophical understanding, which to me is much more conducive with reaching out to people. And which is why I'm sure why even Alex from Freebird Media respects you and wants to give you the opportunity to say what you have to say on his platform. And like I say, I'll even say before we tie this video up, hopefully someday me and Alex can get over our own personal issues or conflicts that we've had, because I like, to me at the end of the day, it's not, I don't want to divide people. I just want us to get more conducive. And I've even my own life, you know, for me to get my kids to do something even better is I have to challenge them at some point. Got to make them uncomfortable every once in a while. And that's just it's an unfortunate thing. But once again, as long as anyone out there watches me and pays attention to anything I'd say, is I have no ill intention towards anyone. I just want to get more adaptive to living in a society that respects each other for our individual characteristics. And as long as we treat each other with a very baseline, finite set of rules, and you know this yourself, is don't hit, don't steal, pretty minor stuff, right? That's all. Is just that let's just get more conducive with accepting and embracing each other and respecting each other individualistic characteristics, but at the same time realize that we have to have foundational goals and principles. Otherwise, we're just playing this game of, it's just a battle of might or the battle of wits. And that game, I mean, if you want to play that game, well, we're basically almost back into the state of nature, and that's actually not conducive for the human flourishment or the example that we've been trying to set for, well, I mean, 2,500 years. Western societies have been trying to take us out of just the realm of might makes right into a more philosophical understanding is how we can cohabitate and coexist with each other peacefully, right? And still benefit ourselves at the same time and everyone else in our community, but at least respecting each other for our individual sovereignty. So once again, Gene, thank you for everything you've done. Thanks for stepping up the plate. At some point in time, I might even have to delve into this political fray. And if that time ever comes, I'll have to do a whole lot of correcting even my own current thought process as far as like not thinking that politics is the end all be all. But once again, I respect those of you who are at least stepping up that plate, because it's not an easy thing. I know for you, it's probably not an easy thing to delve into the politics, because you, as you know, you'll have the media now that will attack you just by sheer fact that you run for the. So I get it. It's not easy. It's difficult, and that's why I respect those of you who do step up the plate. And once again, I won't say anything bad about anyone that's considered, well, like I say, libertarian. I don't care if you're a minarchist. If you have an idea or a concept in your mind that you respect people's sovereignty and their individual rights, freedoms, and liberty, what you do with that, I'm no longer playing the purist game or trying to hold everyone to a ridiculous standard. I understand that's foolish. It's counterproductive in nature, to be honest with you. So I'm willing to support you and anyone else that's out there. So anyone's watching this video, if you're part of the PPC, or even you're just someone that's concerned about how this country is governed, reach out to me. I've put it on all my social media pages. I'm willing to have a conversation. And if you're someone from the left side of the spectrum as well, a collectivist, a socialist, communist, a fascist, I don't care who you are, I want to have a conversation with you, so you'll at least have the understand that people like myself, I don't have a hate on people. I might just be able to help educate and inform you that maybe some of the things that's run through your mind maybe aren't conducive for even some of the things that you actually want to see come to fruition. You probably have some good ideas. It's just maybe that recipe or that road that you're traveling might not be exactly conducive with what your actual end goal is, where that final destination that you want to reach. And that's all at the end of the day is I'm just going to plant some seeds, just like Gene wants to, just like Maxine. I just want to plant some seeds because we recognize there's a void out there in the political and the media landscape, predominantly from those that are part of the establishment of the status quo, that are not giving you any of this information. That's why people are turning and pivoted to people like us today, is because they realize that, fuck, I never heard any of this. Nobody in the established media ever told me any of this stuff. Nobody when I was going through my education, whether it was in K to grade 12 or even in post-secondary, nobody's telling me this stuff. So they're appreciative of the fact that there are people like us that are trying to at least get them to think critically about these issues. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's all we have to offer, because we're not looking to use force. We're not looking to use violence. We're just using the power of persuasion and good ideas. And hopefully, I think humanity, we take a step back once in a while. That's a reality. That's a fact. But I think eventually, if we put the right thoughts and the right ideas forward, that it'll be conducive for every one step we'll take back. We will advance going forward. And we're, like I say, Gene is taking that. He's planting the seeds. I'm planting the seeds. Maxine planting the seeds. We're all trying to plant the seeds so that they'll flourish at some point in time in the future. So this is a long-term prospect. This is a long-term project. So don't be impatient, even if the PBC doesn't get, huge showing of support come October. At least if it's enough, even if we can get enough people in there to at least be a counter voice. Look at what happened in New Brunswick. I'll just say this real quick, Gene. Sorry about that. In New Brunswick, where I'm from, the People's Alliance, they basically came out of nowhere. They were just basically a nobody not even a third party, like basically a fringe party. But now they got to play the role of kingmakers because they got those 3 seats and they joined with the progressive conservatives, because in New Brunswick, you need 25 seats to form a majority. They had 22 for the Conservatives, and now they have this 3 seats from the People's Alliance. But even if, like I say, that People's Alliance party now, even though they're only a representation of 3 seats, by binding forces and forcing the Progressive Conservative Party in New Brunswick to kind of align more along with them to keep them, that vote of confidence and to keep that structure going, that's going to lead them down that path. So even if 2019, even if Maxime Bernier, the PPC, even if they only garner enough support that you can put maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, 5, half a dozen members in there, that is at least going to, like I say, it's going to be that magnetism that's going to try to gravitate people more towards and more conducive to respecting and promoting individual rights, freedom, and liberty. So like I say, whether we win in 2019 is not the end all be all, but at least we're building the foundation. And then 2024 is going to come, right? Yep. Or 2023, 2024. So this is a long-term prospect, is a long-term project. And the very least we can do is lay the ground, lay the foundation, what Gene's doing today, what Maxime's doing today, what everyone that's promoting the PPC is doing today. And in the long term, if we keep doing what we're doing and we're steadfast, because that's the thing, we can't forget. We can't ever get away from the fact that politics plays front and center role in our social and economic lives. So don't pivot away and think that you're just going to forget about it after you've checked that box off. You got to put your nose to the grindstone and keep doing whatever you've got to do to keep putting forth these ideas and the promotion of individual rights and freedoms and liberty. And like I said, that's what's going to affect and change our culture, which will give us real potential for success in the medium and long term.
Well said, and thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no, if you want to say anything there, Gene, sorry, I know that's just me. Like I say, I'm not the best interviewer. That's for sure.
No, you've done very well, thanks.
Okay. Well, thanks, Gene. Like I say, I really appreciate you taking the time of your day to have this interview. And like I say, hopefully I'll get better at my interview skills at some point in time. I'm usually the kind of guy that likes to take the center stage, and I'm really, really trying my best to not be like that. It's really difficult for me, but I'm trying to show a little humility from time to time and give everyone the chance to vocalize and say what they've got to say. And like I say, I have nothing but massive respect for all you that are taking all the time out of your own personal life, because you have like you said, you have your daughters, you have a wife, you have family that relies on you. And the fact that you're going to take all that time out of your personal life to do things that actually is, that's the thing with these lefty. They talk about altruism. You want to talk about someone that's not just doing things that's benefit themselves, but you're also helping a tremendous amount of people. So actually you have a great amount of respect for me for everything that you do that's benefiting a lot of people. And I'm very appreciative to know people like yourself. And I'll do whatever I can. If you ever want to have another interview, if you want me to have a conversation with you, I'll always reach out to me, and I'll do whatever I can. And I'll help support not just you, but the PPC and anyone that stands for individual rights, freedoms, and liberties in this country.
Well, I've got an idea for you.
Cool.
And maybe we might want to have another meeting like this and talk about the mechanics of government, the mechanics of the electoral process, how bills get passed, what happens to them after they get passed, how they get enforced, how it impacts budgets, how it impacts hiring. I think that the more people understand that process, the more people will be looking more intelligently at the kind of suggestions that political parties are making and whether they're realistic or not. I think what Justin Trudeau made, I think it was 141 promises when he came out. But if anybody understood the mechanics, the mechanisms, the business processes, if you want to call them that, about how government makes things happen, then it was really easy for me to look at a lot of the suggestions he was making and realizing that they were not even remotely possible to do. And so you knew that the guy was, he was conning people. It's really the way I looked at it too. So I think I'd love to be part of that, so that we can talk about that, get it out to your audience, so people can look at those mechanics, and that'd be fun to do.
Yeah, actually, that would be great, because that's the thing. That's how we educate and inform people, is getting them into the nitty-gritty details. And that is profoundly important. So yeah, I'll definitely reach out to you, and we'll do that at some point in time in the future, because that's something, like you say, you got to help people out so that they actually have the understanding of the mechanics behind, so they know where, because that to me, that's the best thing you do. You give people, if you educate and inform them, and even people that were promoting democracy, you know, thousands of years ago, understood that the only way even the democracy can ever flourish properly is having a well-educated, informed society. And whatever we can do to make that conducive and propagate that to most people in Canada, that's going to be our best chance going forward. So thanks, Gene, once again. You have yourself a great day and a great rest of your weekend. And reach out to me anytime, and we'll do whatever we can to help educate and inform people in the importance of what it is to respect people's individual rights and freedoms.
Thank you ever so much, Bennett. You have
All right, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.